Thank you. You know, it's difficult enough doing this presentation. I mean, it's quite nerve-wracking to get up here, but when you share the platform with creative, innovative, intelligent people like we've seen previously, it gets a little bit more intimidating, particularly if you're, like myself, you're a financier or a banker, although we'd sooner call ourselves mass murderers than bankers right now. But so financiers are boring. Bankers are boring. You know, the highlight of a fashion statement for a banker is wearing gray, as you can see, you know. And I've got gray shoes too, and they match, you know. So this is tough. And then to take it a little bit further, they add to the irony by putting me after Africa Burns. I mean, seriously, guys, you know. Can you imagine we get a group of financiers together for a conference in the desert, and we create something first, because we don't build anything, and then we burn it. It's just not going to happen. So, okay, I'm going to try my best. I keep trying to spice up money, you know, make it a little bit more interesting by using metaphors. And I've mixed metaphors here, because I talk about money as being like water, because it sustains life, it flows, it is powerful, it is like an elixir of life. I talk about money as lifeblood, you know, similarly brings life. But the reality is it's quite difficult to make money that interesting. We all like to, or many of us, most of us, like to have more of it, but it's difficult to talk about money. So because of that, it loses a lot of its substance and meaning. So for a second, I'm going to digress at the risk of invoking the gods of drumming and taking too much time. But the first speaker today, the video speaker, made me think about something for myself, and that was the concept of vulnerability and how I got to where I am today. And the truth is, about 10 years ago, I was one of those high-flying or perhaps low-flying corporate financial executives. And to use the metaphors again, I hit the wall, the wheels came off, I didn't pull up, whatever it was. I had a bit of a crisis in my life. 10 years, 5 months, 12 days, a couple hours ago. Okay. And when I picked up the pieces again, I kind of took a look at my life and I thought, well, this self-destructive behavior is probably because I'm deeply dissatisfied with what it is that I do. So I did what any self-respecting banker would do, and I took a pilgrimage, and I started to study yoga. So I became a yoga teacher. I took it that far. You know, I'm kind of a bit obsessive-compulsive. Many bankers are like this, and logical, analytical. So I thought, if you're going to do it properly. Do it the best you can. And I came back to South Africa, and I opened a yoga studio, and I started teaching yoga, and I practiced yoga, and I did it for 2.5 hours a day, every day, 6 days a week, and I meditated. I did everything I could. And that, as a business, which was a mistake I think I made, didn't work. So it's funny that. There weren't enough people that had hit the wall, I guess. So it didn't work as a business, and I got pulled back in the vortex of financial services, and that's where I work again today, but in a different way, in a different context. And I'm kind of trying to imagine that there's a different kind of financial services world that exists or can exist out there. So consultants always use 2x2s. Okay, it helps us like deconstruct the world. So here you have things that make money and have low, I'm being generous there because most of it has negative impact in the world. So it has low impact and makes money. And that's where the bulk of the money resides. Okay, and the money is electronic money. Probably about 4% of money in the world is real cash money, and the bulk, the rest, is electronic money. The area I want to talk about is not philanthropy. Okay, this is where it doesn't make a good return, or very often doesn't make any return, but has good positive impact, we hope. The area I want to talk about is here, where there's commercial returns, which may not be as good as the mainstream area of the market, but they still make commercial returns and they have significant positive impact. So either social, societal, environmental, and/or cultural impact is made with the use of that money. And I'll give you examples of it later, but to think of it in significance, I'm not talking about the whole of mainstream shifting to sustainable finance. If 1% of assets under management were to shift into this area, we would have the equivalent of about $2 trillion to play with. Play with, I mean to use and deploy in pursuit of solving some of the significant challenges and problems that we have in the world today. Why would we do this? We do this because it's better for us. Because we will live healthier, happier, better lives. So there's good reason, there's good motivation to think about doing this. Remember I said earlier, we only need 1% of the assets to shift, and the reality is that 1% of assets can make a significant difference in some of the challenges that we have. So for social entrepreneurs, these issues are challenges that they can see as opportunities. They can deploy businesses in pursuit of making meaningful impact and returning commercial return out of solving some of the problems in the world today. And we don't need a lot of money, and we don't need a lot of money in order to make significant impact. So if I put it to numbers, which again, we are wont to do as financiers, if 1% of money were to move, it would probably catalyze another 9% of commercial money because it de-risks the opportunity in social and environmental challenges. So let's say 10% of money moved. And if 10% of money moved, solving many of these problems would be well within the means or capabilities of that money. I think that money is critically important. I mean, I think that previously in the old world, money was created by us to grease the wheels of the economy. But increasingly, money is central to the economic and financial system. I don't see that as changing. We can throw stones at it, but it makes more sense to me to reinvent that, to finesse it, to change the inflection point. So the previous speaker talked about moving the Titanic, and that's a great analogy. How do we do that? We do that by working at providing financial capital to projects and businesses that promote or do not harm economic prosperity, environmental protection, and social justice. It's happening, but it's not happening. So we can, if I have enough time, we'll talk a little bit about that. But the reality is there's significant barriers to that change taking place. And I don't want to undermine them, but I want to concentrate on 3 significant barriers. And the picture I use there is of a mouse and an elephant, and there's a YouTube Mythbusters clip, which is fantastic, and they actually prove that this is true, that if you put a mouse in front of an elephant, it gets a hell of a fright and changes direction. We need more mice in the economy. The mice are the sustainable finance companies that antagonize, that are protagonists, that do things differently, and they can continue to be small, but they will shift the big elephants, hopefully. In order for the mice to be there, though, we need the barriers to be broken. We need the inertia to be broken because many of us, like I said earlier, we don't like to talk about money and we use money. So we have transaction accounts, we have savings accounts, we have retirement monies, we have unit trusts, we have all of these things. But how many of us question where that money goes? It's our money. How many of us interrogate the financial institutions that are custodians of our money to find out what they're investing in, what they're propagating, what they're allowing to happen with your money? Not many, I would argue. Failures will be seized upon. So there was a failure of a solar company in America. Everybody makes a big issue about the fact, solar doesn't work, it's not commercial, it's inefficient. Look, this company failed. The truth is 50% of Fortune 500 companies in the last 10 years have churned. That means they've either failed or they're no longer Fortune 500 companies. Failure is the nature of a competitive landscape. Failure will happen. But in the current environment, it will be seized upon. And in the absence of a new model, which unfortunately there's not, because many people in sustainable finance are battling with how you measure. So it's easy to measure commercial return, but how do you measure positive social impact? What are the metrics? What do you report on? How do you make sure it's consistent? How do you compare creation of jobs versus saving of carbon? So it is more complex and it is more difficult, but that's not a good reason to throw it out. Let me give you an example of 1 or 2 projects that we're working on to give you a flavor or give some reality to the types of things that we are doing. The one is helping with consumer finance of solar water heaters and heat pumps. The key issue here is not to do it as a conventional finance transaction, but to do it such that the consumer saves from day one. So immediately you pay less for the loan than you get in electricity savings. So from a consumer perspective, it's a no-brainer. Of course, move to solar water heaters or heat pumps. From a financing perspective, we can still make that commercial. From an environmental perspective, that has huge positive outputs and outcomes and carbon reduction benefits. Another example, which is quite similar, is working with companies, working with office blocks, working with shopping malls to help them become more energy efficient. So often companies don't want to use their own balance sheet to do energy efficiency projects. So there again, we just bridge the financing gap, help them, provide the capital, and then the returns we get via reducing the electricity consumption. So we share the returns. We use the savings in electricity to pay back the loan, and also to give some benefit to the company. So again, the impact is immediate. So what can you do, we do? The reality is, it's incumbent upon us to change. Many of these organizations don't presently exist, so these are the types of things that are happening internationally, the different names that sustainable finance companies are called. Many of these don't exist in South Africa, and the ones that do exist are fledgling and tiny. And the reality is, part of the reason that they don't exist is that there's not a sufficient demand. There's not enough consumers asking for this. There's not enough savers and investors saying, no, I don't want my money to go to X, Y, Z. I want it to go to something that has a positive impact. Or I just want a part of it to go to that because I believe in it. So like consumption behavior changes the nature of products that are manufactured, so too the same will happen in financial services. So it could only happen with everybody getting involved. Now, immediately, if you're logical, analytical, like me, you'd say, oh, but isn't this more risky and is it going to work? And I'll give you examples. I can give you plenty, but I'm counting down quickly. Yeah? I'll give you one. Triodos Bank is a cooperative bank that came out of being a farming cooperative. It's been around as an ethical bank in 5 European countries for over 30 years now. They have been the best performing bank in the world in the last since 2008, the last 4 years. But going back further than that, over the last 10 years, they've grown annually at over 20% per annum. Been enormously successful, focused wholly and only in the sustainable and ethical finance realm. So not only is it good for us, but it can also be imminently commercial. So change your behavior now, change the flow of money. Thank you.